Welcome to the podcast, Melody and Friends, where I will take a virtual tour around the world, interviewing all kinds of wonderful people. And today we land in Newport Beach, California, to interview Dr. Sheri Keffer on intimate deception. I actually repurposed this interview from a little bit ago, and so many of you have been impacted by this interview. And so I wanted to bring this back around to our podcast, Melody and Friends, so that you can enjoy this. So join me in talking with Dr. Sheri Keffer.
Right. So before we dive in, and those who may not know anything about Dr. Sheri Keffer, I want to just share quickly, I got to meet you last October at the AACC conference, where you were exhibiting as well as teaching. And so I had the opportunity, I read your book a while back ago, which is phenomenal for anybody that has not read this book. I know anybody in our tribe knows about this book, but I got to read this book, and so was really excited about not only you presenting at the AACC conference, but getting to come to your exhibit and meeting you and your husband. So welcome, Dr. Keffer.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's so great to be with you and your tribe. And I got to tell you, I might get a little teary during this interview. And let me tell you why. Because I love you. And so as I have gotten to know your story, it moves me in a way that many don't. And let me tell you why. It's because I don't have your story, right? I had a Connor. And Connor and I were married. He was a pastor. And I'll tell you something, I never fought so hard for any one human being than I fought for Connor. But we met and married. And you know what? It's going to tell you a little bit about me because we dated long distance for a year and then got married. And so we had these 12 luscious weekends together of early courtship. And truly, I wasn't aware of what intimacy looked like. I mean, it was fantasy, really, because how can you get to know anybody in 12 short weekends? And so it made me, when everything kind of broke loose, begin to reflect on who I am, where I came from, and how my roots, and some roots of growing up in a home with severe mental illness, actually caused me to grow up more disconnected. And so when I met Connor, he was already working at as a pastor, right, at a large church. And I seriously, coming from my family, I thought I just found the glass slipper that I was going to put my foot into. But I didn't know that he had been struggling with pornography for a long time. And it had grown to a King Kong size, acting out sexually compulsively, even prior to us being married. But there was one moment, Melody, which I'll never forget, where he called a 900 number. And I didn't even know what that was. I was in Bible college, and he came and confessed it to me. He said, I'm so sorry. I called this 900 number and I feel really bad about what I did. And so when I asked him, like, what was it? It's like a sex line. And now back in the day, I thought it was, you call a number and there's somebody who's like a tape recording, breathing heavy on the other end, but it's not that, right? That's how naive I was. Yeah. It was talking to a real person, but I didn't find that out till years into our marriage. But I that day when I found that out, what I didn't do is go deeper. I didn't ask questions. I didn't wonder about how many times he'd done it before. I didn't ask questions about the, porn or, what are you doing? I forgave him that day. I spiritualized my issue, which is a form of denial, right? I made light of it and then kept moving and married him anyway. And so it wasn't until 6 months into our marriage that he was pulling away from me sexually, and I had waited to have sex till we were married. So it was kind of an odd thing to feel like our sex life changed very quickly. And I remember calling a girlfriend of mine and saying, okay, so what's it like for you to, her husband's name is Kevin. And I said, Julie, what's it like for you and Kevin? Like after you make love, like, cause I literally was confused. And she's like, oh my gosh, the next day is good. It's kind of like there's good connecting and like oil in the gears. And I said, it is not that way for me. Connor's more edgy and uptight, and I feel like I did something wrong. And because what I didn't know is that there was a whole host of sexual activities that were happening right under my nose. And those sexual activities included pornography, affairs, prostitutes, a lot of deceptive acts. So my book, Intimate Deception, Healing the Wounds of Sexual Betrayal, is actually my own story. But even probably more important than my own story is what steps a betrayed partner needs to take in order to do two things: heal, find safety and truth, and confront what's happening in her home. Because as long as that King Kong sized problem is eating up the space, the air in the room, and it's beginning to rob you and rob your family of intimacy, there is no way you can have closeness when sexual betrayal is at the helm. And so it's like, I want to help partners heal and heal well, and then find their voice, find their strength, be that warrior that pushes back against what's happening so that we can stop what is happening at a very huge level right now that is taking our families by deceit.
That's so good. I love how you talk about that. And I think it's good to unpack this, because I could relate to your story as I was reading some of this, and then women that are growing up in the church, you just naturally here's this covenant, for better or for worse. There are things that are happening. I can't put my finger on it. He's got periods of time that I don't know where he is. And then he's got these fabricated stories. At that time I was confused. I feel crazy, and a lot makes sense afterwards. But I love how you said, I want to help women begin to understand more quickly, so that they can pay attention to what some of those signs are, because, 20 years ago, we didn't even know what to pay attention to. The word sex addiction wasn't even talked about. So talk a little bit about what would be some of those signs for her to pay attention to?
So, this is what's really interesting. I was just on New Life Radio today talking, and a woman called in, and she was talking about how the person that she was with out of nowhere just started saying, I think you're having an affair. I think you're having an affair. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I've been as loyal as the day is long, but he is convinced. And I told her, I said, I will take the license off my wall and I will put it on stakes right now. I really believe he's projecting this on you. Projection is when somebody's doing something bad over here, in this case, sexually acting out, but he's not owning it. Instead, he's putting it on you like a projector screen. And of course, we get kind of spun out because we don't understand what's going on. So projection is one of the things that happens when somebody is hiding deceit. Oftentimes, if you notice that they've got their phone like their umbilical cord with them at all times, and they get defensive if you want to know what they were looking at, or if you walk into a room and all of a sudden the computer screen comes down, or they quickly get out of whatever they were watching. The COVID-19 virus has been so challenging for many. Porn is up by 54%. So it's not just a COVID-19 virus. It is a porn epidemic, right? There's this pandemic in porn because there's extra time on their hands. There's all these emotions that aren't really being processed well by those that are struggling. So I was chatting with a woman, she reached out to me, and painfully, her husband has been in recovery for a couple years, but all this pressure, she walked into their bedroom the other day and there he was on his computer looking at porn. So when there's defensiveness, when there's anger, when there's blame, when there's minimization, making light of it, when there's things that put it on us, when we confront them and they make us look like the bad guy and somehow they're in the victim seat, these are all signs of deception and of somebody really not being in true sobriety and recovery over what is going on in their world. So when we see these, I mean, I looked away because I didn't want to face what it would look like to maybe lose our ministry. I didn't want to face what it might look like to lose our home. And quite honestly, I was freakazoid scared out of my mind. I felt ugly. I felt less than, and I was flattened. And so I really am passionate about helping to get women up off the ground from the flatness of sexual betrayal as quickly as possible. Get them into an ICU ward, right? All the things that they need to get whole again, much like a trauma, treating a trauma like an ICU ward.
Right.
I want them on their gurney, and so that we, like folks like you and I and others that are really seeking to help families with sexual betrayal, helps them become stronger so they can even get up to fight and have a voice.
So talk a little bit about what was the wake up for you. There was a lot of confessions in your book. I remember hearing him come to you again and again. But what was that moment in time where you're like, I can't keep doing this?
Yeah.
This has got to stop.
Great question, Melody. Let me tell you something. It was depression. It's weird. You'd think it'd be one event, but for me, it was that my body finally started getting honest with me. My body became depressed. There's a chapter in my book called Your Bodyguard, and I talk about how the brain works with the body, but my brain went into a state of collapse and it took my body down with it. I couldn't continue to keep the secret and keep the lie as I had these discoveries of porn, right? There was one time when Connor he'd been taking money out of our account, and I went and looked and found a bank receipt, but there was nothing attached to it. It was just this cash. Well, I didn't know that he was seeing prostitutes, right? And I hadn't wanted to look, but you have those incremental discoveries before the lid comes off of this. And those incremental discoveries, because nothing changed in our relationship, we weren't getting the correct help. It led to depression. And we were at a camp, and I remember a young gal came up to me. She was as cute as a button, and I was not coming out of my cabin. We were there for a ministry retreat with a whole church, and she came up to my door and wanted to have dinner with me. And I just said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I'm not feeling well." Lie. But what else am I going to do? I didn't want to tell her story, but it's like I'd been lying to myself. But when she said, I said, "Okay, honey, I'm so sorry. I can't, maybe tomorrow." And I went to close the door. And before I did, she looked around at me and said, "Miss Sheri," she said, "I hope someday that I can marry someone just like Connor. And you could have hit me with a 2x4 because everything inside of me just wanted to scream, 'No, Jenna, no, don't.'" But that weekend was the collapse, and I finally reached out to one of the pastors on staff with us, and I let it out. I shared what was going on, and that began the trajectory of a whole lot of dominoes beginning to tilt, collide, and fall, and consequences, and then getting us into a treatment center for pastors and wives with issues, right? It wasn't a sex addiction or sexual program, but it was one that they recommended to try to get us into starting to look for some help. So
let's talk a minute, because you are a doctor. I think you're so proficient, not only just with your own personal story, but clinically, thank the Lord we're not talking about addict, co-addict anymore, or codependency and addict. We're actually using the terminology betrayal trauma.
yeah.
And you even talk about complex trauma in here. Give us a little lesson, for those that are listening right now. Maybe they've never even heard the word betrayal trauma or sexual betrayal. Give us a little lesson for those of us that don't know.
Yeah, what it is.
Yeah.
Well, I've learned a lot about what it is, and I think it's been through my own journey of digging out. One of the things that I've done recently to unpack the impact of sexual betrayal is I interviewed 100 women. I did some research and found out that 76% of us, of you and me and those that are listening that have experienced sexual betrayal, 76% of us have clinical symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Now, this is like the same stuff that folks that are in the military get when they go out and they serve and they battle and then they come back and then they have to go out and do it again. Or, people that were in 9/11 had post-traumatic stress. And so it causes us to stop and to start respecting like what is happening in our bodies, and that this isn't just an indiscretion. When somebody says there's been a sexual indiscretion, do you know what? The hair on the back of my head and my neck, it stands up, because that word sexual indiscretion is minimization. It's not little. And I'm talking pornography. When I looked at who had clinical symptoms, out of that 76%, there were some that had pornography without affairs. There were some that had affairs with pornography. There were some that had prostitutes. I looked at what the sex acts were. And so it's big. So betrayal trauma is very real. And this is the hardest thing about what you and I think the message we're trying to get to our wives, and it's the same message that I needed to hear, is when all this deception happens, we immediately start looking at them going, stop it, right? Because it's hurting me. Yeah. Do what you need to do to get fixed. But the piece that most of us miss is that we have just been impacted by shame, our body, our anxieties off the map. We get depressed. Our immune system shuts down because we go into fight or flight. And so the actual part of our body that fights, things like cancer and other things, and immune disorders, actually it shuts off for a period of time because we're in fight. And that is not a necessary thing when you're fighting. If there's a tiger running up after you, the first thing you do is you push back or you run. And so your legs are charged up and you go into this mode. And so our body goes, well, I'm going to kind of shut off that cancer fighting thing for a while. But when women like us or men who've been betrayed do not get the right help and they don't get on their own gurney to deal with the post-traumatic stress symptoms, we end up with fibromyalgia, Epstein-Barr, heart. I've had women have to have heart pacers put in their chest because the craziness is staying crazy in their household and they're staying without any change.
Yeah.
And it's hard on us. And so I cry out to you, if you're listening right now and you are one of those women that is like me and Melody, scared because you don't know what to do, please don't stay alone. We are here for you. We want to help you know how you can begin to Focus on yourself to get your physical healing, your emotional healing, and your strength back so that you don't end up with these complicating factors down the road.
Yeah. You said that. I thought about just a couple of things as you were talking, and I mentioned this a good bit too. You mentioned the military and you mentioned 9/11. What's very interesting about both of those is if I was in the military and I was experiencing combat, let's say somebody in my unit was getting blown up, I've got other members in my unit to run to for support, for aid. 9/11, the same thing. In that moment of total chaos, I can run to a firefighter, EMS, or whatever to get some relief, some reprieve, some help. What's so difficult and traumatic about betrayal is the person that I would normally run to that's supposed to be safest and protect me is the actual person who created all the pain. So I don't even in that moment, and I know you were experiencing this, you're a pastor's wife. So who are you going to tell? And the very person that I might run to is the pastor and the person that I'm in a relationship with, which makes it just compounds all that pain.
It totally compounds it, because I love your example of the battleground. It's crazy when the person that you thought would love and protect you is the one that throws the grenade in the foxhole you're in, right? It's like, oh my gosh, you're the guy that just blew us up. And then he's denying that he threw the grenade, right? And who is supposed to tell about all this? But once you begin to truly understand what's going on with his sexual compulsivity issue, the acting out, once you begin to understand the symptoms that are going on in your body and you start becoming wise, you're coming along and following, those of us, myself and others that are in the field, because we have grown through and we're still healing in this process. But when you get wiser and you start to learn about all this, knowledge is power. And all of a sudden, it's like you get your truth on and you start going, I'm not crazy, but crazy is happening around me. And that in and of itself is gold. When I look at a woman and I tell her, this is not about you. It's not about you. Right. It could have been any woman that he was married to, or any girlfriend, it could have been any boyfriend you were with, right? It's not about you. And neither is it that you're crazy. Right? Crazy is happening around you. And more often than not, the women, when I tell them that, they start tearing up, right? Crocodile tears, because that shame that gets put on us like tar, like bad Velcro. Shame sticks to us like glue, and it makes us believe things like, I'm not enough. I'm not pretty enough. I deserve this. I'm not in control. I can't trust anyone. I can't even trust my own judgment, right? That is shame. Shame is that negative belief about yourself that gets stuck onto you, that you need to get some truth around that in order to get back into your right mind and back into your heart again and back on track to who you really are.
That's so good. I recently have been walking with a lady who was actually in 9/11, and I thought it was fascinating because I wanted to hear all about her story. She was working in the bank that was in the Twin Towers, and so she experienced that, and then she also experienced a car wreck where she had to have all these surgeries and basically learn to walk again. And she came to me as a betrayed spouse, and it was about 2 weeks after that, and she said, and she even talked about some of her experience about like being in a bank or something like that after 9/11 and just kind of being glazed over and somebody like having to tap her on the shoulder. But a couple weeks after our first conversation, she said, Melody, nothing compares to this. And I mean, like, here's somebody who was in 9/11 running down the street with shrapnel all over her. And I mean, we hear that but like for a woman who has been in both places to say, this doesn't compare or this pain is so much larger than those other events that happened in my life. It was, and I've known that, but just, it was really cool to literally have a witness who had been in 9/11 and experienced this.
Wow, Melody, what I'm hearing you say is trauma, right? 9/11 is a trauma event. Mm-hmm. Military service and having things blown up is trauma. But what I just heard you say, and I can resonate, right? When a partner hears that, we're like, yeah, thank you for her putting it into words for us. Sexual betrayal is a trauma of intimacy. Yeah. It's a trauma of deceit. It's like it fractures that relationship in a way that it's different than a building. It's like, how do I rebuild this? How do I take this shattering that's happened to my life, my heart, my marriage, and how do I put this back together again? It's like the Humpty Dumpty that, you don't even know where to start. I, like you, have this early story of when I was really in shell shock. Connor and I had just I had just told the pastors we had somewhat of an intervention. And then we were meeting at the home of an elder and his wife, and we had dinner with them. Sweetheart, her name is Anne, and they were really trying to reach out to us in this, place of collapse. And so the week following, I was at the store, just walking down, getting some food, throwing it in my cart. And I happened to be in the frozen food section. And, I opened it up and I was looking for frozen peas. I don't even eat frozen peas now, but I was looking for frozen peas. I know I was making this casserole I used to make. That was one of Connor's mom's recipes. So, look at me. Here I am making his mom's favorite recipe in the midst of this. I mean, do you hear that? Like, where was I? But I'm like walking wounded. Yep. So I open up that, and then this very kind lady comes up to me as I'm putting the peas into my cart. And she said, Sheri, hey, so good to see you. And I looked at her and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know who this is. And I looked at her and I said, I am so sorry. I don't mean to be disrespectful. Can you tell me your name? And she said, honey, this is Anne. You were just at my house last weekend for dinner. Okay. Right? Numbed out, shell shock, not having anywhere in my brain to put things. I mean, seriously, my brain was frozen peas. I was like, it was mush. But those are the symptoms of betrayal trauma. It's our desperate cry to stop the pain of what's happening, because we don't want to hurt anymore. We don't want our families to be at risk.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about your healing process. Like, what did that look like? You meet with the elders. I'm sure this was public, or it was public. Your situation couldn't really be hidden. So you've got not only the layers of the story that's happening to you and that pain, but now it's public. So it feels like you're walking around with the scarlet A on your chest. But talk a little bit about just that healing process for you. What did it look like?
So it wasn't public. We were given a going away party. So the church basically covered it up, and they released us, but it was with the understanding that we were, as a couple, in burnout. We had some issues that we needed to address. And I love the senior pastor. I was he was teaching, this was probably about 10 years ago, at an event. It was for pastors talking about sex addiction in the church and how do we help people. And he's very respected. The room was full with pastors, and there was an open mic and you can go up and ask questions. And so I went up, and I was shaking in my boots because I hadn't seen him for a very long time. And yet I had a question I wanted to ask about us, about partners, and what the church was doing to recognize and get us help. And so I came up to the mic and I respectfully addressed him. And I said, his name. And I said, I don't know if you remember me. And out loud in front of these hundreds of pastors, he said, Sheri, I will never forget you. He said, I made a mistake. I made a grave mistake in what I did with you and he didn't expose my husband's name, but he said I made a grave mistake. And after that event, I learned everything I could about what needed to change because I didn't want it to happen again. Now that is a noble pastor, right? Who really wanted to make a change. But healing for me was a long, twisty road because you said it earlier, Melody, we didn't have a roadmap.
Right.
And it's not a one size fits all, even now.
Right.
But I didn't know what I needed to do to stop the sexual acting out. I didn't know how to own my voice. I didn't know how to set a boundary for the life of me. So I stumbled for a long time and went into depression. And the therapy that we were in, okay, and this is, I know it's one of my platforms I speak from out of desperate hurt. So we had one therapist who was seeing us as a couple, seeing him and seeing me. Now, I love this therapist, but because she was holding all three parts, do you think Connor came clean? No, he had no safe place. So how the model is now is that you have someone who's certified in sex addiction therapy, somebody who's really good and knows what they're doing. That therapist works with the betrayal trauma piece, right? The partner goes in for her own care, right? So she can deal with her betrayal trauma. And there's many steps: safety, finding safety in the relationship, setting boundaries. And there's something called a full disclosure, a therapeutic full disclosure that happens because we want the truth to come out. I write a chapter on that in my book. But that all happens why these two therapists have the ability to talk to each other. So there's no secret keeping. They give the husband a safe place to be able to figure out how to dump what he's been doing and bring it into a safe sharing of information. So for me, my book is really a map because I struggled for 15 years. I wandered, wounded. I healed broken. I couldn't connect with other men. I was afraid of other men. And at some level, I was a man hater at one point. I was like, seriously, God, there is something with the man manual. You have made a mistake here, right? And so I was so broken. I didn't trust anyone, and I didn't trust my own judgment, which I talk about that in my book. It's the deadly duo. I had some shame that I didn't know how to peel back. So it wasn't until I did some good work with somebody who does EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, that helped me get into the trauma of those lies, because I couldn't seem to change my mind about them. They kept popping up like bad weeds. And so I had to do some deeper trauma work around some of that shame that was still sticking to me. But there's this phrase I say, it's WIT, W-I-T, whatever it takes. I want you to get your wits about you. I want you to do whatever it takes, whatever you need to reclaim the truth of who you are, and think about how you were before the betrayal happened, right? Just remember that girl, because that girl got like splatted, right? And then whatever it takes for you to get back into the truth of who you are, and you will be stronger. You will be more whole. You will be a richer version of yourself. You will be a woman of worth, not because you just kind of go, well, I heard that in, Sunday school. You will become a woman of worth because you will find that nobody can take that away from you.
Right. That's right.
And so all this pain has led me on a path of becoming who I am. I was so afraid to deal with the pain. And so what happened is I exchanged it for suffering. I was suffering without change for a very long time until I was able to face the pain and allow myself to move through that hurt and invest in me to get stronger. But that pain part of my story has now become like a strength part of my story. And I get to have conversations with many of you to help you figure out how to get out of that spin crazy place with the sexual deception and how not to have to stay there. A lot of us fear drawing that hard line when the one we've loved, we've fought for, we've been married to isn't doing the work.
Right.
They're doing lip service. As I say, they're kicking tires. Yep. And they're trying to become minimalists in whatever that thing they think we're trying to see, whatever that thing is, to make us calm down. But they're really not getting sober. So recovery is when you're on a path to change. Right. Sobriety is when's the last time you have sexually acted out with yourself or anybody else? And we never know the outcome, right? When we draw those lines in the sand, and when I told Connor, I can't do this anymore. I won't. I'm not going to stay on this revolving door of prostitutes, of affairs, of porn. It's hurting me. I'm not doing it. And he said, but I want to stay married to you. I don't want to leave you. You're the one that's wanting to leave me. And I said, Connor, you have rendered me helpless today because you are committed to those women outside more than you're committed to me. And God did not make our marriage to be a revolving door. We are tenacious warriors in our soul. God made us women who are such fighters. And I think that part of me was so committed. It felt like I wasn't even fighting for his freedom. I was fighting against Satan. I was like, you will not win this. I am not going to let you win. I mean, it was that. I even went to that length. But then what I realized is you got to have two people fighting.
That's right.
You got to have two people that are committed to do the work so they can heal and get into truth. I love what you said is I cannot be married to a liar. Mm-hmm. It's the lie and the deceits that hurts us so much. And, interesting research really quickly. One of the things that, so the same women, the 100 women that I did the research with, I asked them a question. I said, why both of these things are really painful, really bad. Is it the sexual acts that your husband did that you know about that is more painful? Or is it the continued patterns of lies that he's doing? 65% of them said it's the continued patterns of lies. And then those same 100 women, and this resonates with our hearts and what I'm saying about that we're fighters. When I asked the question, well, if he was to stop lying and get into his sobriety, how many of you would stay? And do you know how many said, I will tenaciously walk this out with you? Do you know how many said they would stay? 88%.
Wow.
So if you are a man right now today and you have betrayed your wife and you are listening to this conversation that Melody and I are having, I want you to know right now, the woman that is standing with you is a gift from the Almighty God. And she is trying to help you heal. And if you can't hear her cry for you to get into treatment, for you to get into care, for you to get into your own work, because you are being deluded by women that you don't know, you don't listen to, and you're not married to. They don't know what you look like when you wake up in the morning. They don't know what bad breath sounds like. They don't know the behavior that goes along with all the stuff that is a part of humanity. It's false. I just want to say she's standing right in front of you. She's fighting for your heart. Please don't miss what God has sent you. You haven't, and your Ezra, she's a champion. Please don't lose her. Lose the addiction. Lose the compulsive sexual acting out. Lose the affair partner. Let it go because it's not real anyway. Get out of your self-deception, my friend, and get into your healing, because there's a lot of us that are fighting for you, your wife, your kids, your community, God himself. So please, don't let this moment pass. Do your work, because most often we'll work it out with you if you'll do what you need to do to get it right.
Yeah, and I would just say that's a great word for any man that's listening today. I would say if you are a wife, a betrayed spouse, and some of this is resonating with you, even the children of Israel had an opportunity to come out of Egypt and move toward the promised land, but there was a time and point where they wanted to be back in Egypt because they had a bed to sleep in and they had food. And it may be terrifying and it may not even feel like you are loving your spouse well to say what Sheri said, enough is enough. I can't do this anymore. It doesn't always have to end in divorce. It may be a healing separation for a season.
True.
You cannot heal in a toxic, destructive relationship with ongoing deception. You can't save yourself in that situation. And so if that is you, I just want you to know you are worth it. So be brave and find some safe people to step out of the captivity that you might find yourself in and start a path. Jump onto Dr. Sheri's website. Find out her resources. She's got a blog. She's got an incredible book. Oh my gosh, this book will validate everything, every thought, every feeling, every emotion that you've ever felt before. This book is for you.
Oh, thank you, Melody. And it is really that. It's the get it factor. Yeah. Those of you that are listening today, we don't even have to fill in the blanks. We get it. We get what we've been through. And so my website is braveone.com. It's BRAVEONE.com, because I believe we are incredibly brave to walk into this. I also want to let you know, I'm so excited. I've opened a Brave One community, which I know. And let me tell you why I did this. It really came out of the coronavirus and feeling so isolated and having women reach out to me with the porn going up and sexual acting out happening and not having a place that was safe for them. Their groups, some of their face-to-face groups had been shut down. Their therapists, some of them aren't seeing them. Right. So out of this crucible of pain, I faced my fear, which was technology. I hired a coach to help me learn how to do Zoom. And so just know, I know you need help. And so this Brave One community is birthed, and it's really a chance for you to come closer into a tribe of other women who get it, and to be able to talk with me, ask me questions, be able to help you get on your right path. And I'm tired of feeling so like over here to so many women. This is a global problem. And so I love the fact that I get to bring you all closer into my world, and I want to help you get on this Brave One journey. And so there's a bunch of free information and stuff that I'm going to be bringing to you to help you heal. So check out braveone.com, and I'm for you. Melody's for you. And, we just want you to get what you need.
Yes, that is awesome. I'm going to put all the links to this in our show notes so that they can get straight to you.
This episode has been brought to you by Life Beyond Betrayal. Life Beyond Betrayal is a comprehensive program that provides a community as well as 3 courses for women. The first course is Surviving Trauma Beyond Betrayal. Our second course is called Grieving Beyond Betrayal. And the third course is called Reclaiming You Beyond Betrayal. This is a self-paced program that you can take as long as you want to go through, and also provides a community so you feel like you have the support that you need. So check out Life Beyond Betrayal membership at lifebeyondbetrayal.com.